just cut the cable and it moved quite a bit. And, one more cable to cut. Hi, the date is April 29th, 2003. What we have here is a situation where an enormous live oak split and impacted the house. The split is about 7 to 8 feet long and about 3 to 4 feet across, and comprises a very, very large limb that currently is being stabilized by the ridge beam of this portion of the house, which was built very, very well. The interior is a timber frame, and if it wasn't built so strong, I'm sure it would have crushed it. This limb is still stabilized. We've taken off all the side brush over on this side already, but it's stabilized with a foot on the ground as well. On the other side of the tree, you can see that the limb has completely split through, and half of it is still on the trunk, but the main portion that is split off is barely hanging in there. The second limb, a very, very large limb, also going over the house, is cabled to the limb that split and fell by 3 cables up in the top, and it's putting an awful lot of stress on this limb as it's causing it to crack. On the other side of the same limb, there's a crack that's opening up. It's a twisting, splitting crack, and it is getting worse by the minute. It's about 7 to 8 feet long right now. The same limb is resting on the other ridge of the house, which is probably the only reason it hasn't fallen off completely. The limb that's split is resting on this particular ridge beam and has caused some damage to the house, and down low impacted the house hard enough to crack this limb in half. This limb is the one that is split, and the entirety of this very large limb that's towering over the house is attached to the split portion of the limb that I am filming. We attached a very large cable to this limb and attached it to a chain doubled around at the top portion of this, but unfortunately the only thing we could tie it to is in itself another rotten limb. This is hopefully, if it splits off tonight, that'll hold it. This is one of the more difficult jobs that I've ever encountered. It seems the only approach I can do is a little bit here and a little bit there to try to lighten the load, but in the meantime the whole thing seems to be giving away while we're working on it. And it's so hazardous, and there's so many cables up in the tree. There must be 20 cables in this tree. There's so many cables in the tree that if anything does go, the likelihood of it pulling something else down is very great. So working in this tree in any location is extremely hazardous. We've been working with a bucket to get up to this point because I don't want to put a man up in the tree, and we've been working above everything that we've been cutting on this side, and we also utilized the bucket to stabilize it, or hopefully stabilize it with this cable. But because the bucket has a double arm system, there's a lot of branches in the way here, so I'm opting to I've called out to United Rentals to have them bring in a telescoping boom that I'm hoping I will be able to get up close and project clear out over it. At that point, it'll enable me to get into a position where I can utilize a crane to attach the cable and the ties to the branches, that I can extract them one at a time. My biggest problem is disconnecting all the cables without having this thing come crashing down. So I may have to put up some temporary cables or ropes or something, but the branch is so big that is being supported that I don't believe ropes is the answer. And there's really not a lot of places I can cable to. There's just an upper area that's pretty rotten. And just an extreme amount of weight. This is truly a remarkable tree. Its spread is very wide. It has a magnificent burl growing off of it, and the tree has just been cabled. Like I said, there must be 20 cables throughout this tree. It seems like every branch is cabled. Had the cables not been in this tree when this limb failed, I believe that we would not have experienced as many problems. As it is, it's pulling down the other section of the tree, and the likelihood of it falling on the house tonight is very strong. There is quite a bit of evidence of internal decay that would have been very hard to identify. You can see it going up through the main portion of that upper section that split off, and down here in the main part of this massive limb. As you can see, there were 3 cables that were also part of this massive limb, and all 3 of them failed. There's 3 dangling cables up there right now. And there's another cable that's dangling on the ground. Yeah, there's cables everywhere in this tree. And what we got going on here is another split cable, or broken cable. The whole inside of this limb that's split off is punky. It's quite obvious from the ground. There is quite a bit of oozing from the bark, which may be from the Phytophthora, but it's right underneath this enormous burl, which I haven't spoke of. It's a beautiful growth on the side of the tree. From another angle, and more showing. This is a little better detail of how precarious this is. There's very little holding here, and it's just sort of wedged on this little piece of bark here. I don't know why this thing hasn't split off it here. There's another split that happened upon impact that leads me to believe that the tree hit the house pretty solidly. It tore this limb off, and it's resting on the ridge, and this torn limb is on the bottom here, and there's another limb sitting on top of that. And it's straddling the house very nicely. The wind is picking up now, so I'm a little concerned about the tree. Okay, now in analyzing what to do, we found this an extremely difficult one to come up with an answer, but it's obvious that there's a lot of weight leaning towards the house, and my main concern now is not to take off so much over on this side so as the limb just rotates into the house. So we needed to get enough branches off on this side so we can get through and work from this angle over here, because we need to work around the side. And I also felt that it was prudent to get, there was a mountain of brush out in this area, and I felt that if the wind picked up, that could aid in rocking this whole thing. I don't know, it's a judgment call. I could have gone either way, but we did take off several thousand pounds of weight off of it, so at this point I think any weight reduction is a plus. But now we've got the imbalance going on, so we shall see. I'm very worried about that upper canopy being torn down in the night, and if that happens, if that branch continues to break, we may come out here and find this whole tree inside the house in the morning. And according to the client, this section of the house is not built to the same quality as this side over here. This is more of a timber frame interior, and this side is more standard framing. So there will be a lot of damage if that happens. This house is in Saratoga, and it's in the very exclusive area of Saratoga, and it's a wonderfully built house. It's got some very interesting character to it, and this tree was quite an addition to the front of the house. After the loss of this limb, if that other limb doesn't fail, we're going to have to do something to try to salvage what's left of the tree, and that may not be a viable resource or viable option. This area of the upper canopy has a branch that looks like it's been cabled too, and it appears that there's some swellings as a result of the cables. There's at least 2 cables over here, and I believe there was a couple of them over there, because you can see some broken cables over on that side from where it gave way. I'm just wondering if this is an area that's had an extreme amount of pulling and twisting as a result of the cables. There's not a lot of foliage in the upper canopy either. It seems that there is a bit of upper canopy decline. As I said before, I left this very large branch as a stabilizing foot, but I also left this portion up against the house. It broke off, and I'm leaving it pushing on the building because it seems to act as a way of additional stabilization for this whole branch to keep it from moving. And as I'm standing here, I just heard a crack, which tells me that this is continuing to move. It's making lots of strange little noises right now. And once again, I really don't know if that's going to hold. I'm afraid if this gives way in the night, just the lunge from the swinging action could exert enough pull from all the cables that are still up there to possibly pull down that other portion of the tree. So we shall see. I will carry on in the morning. Okay, here we go. On the mark and set go. We've got King Crane in here with a 110-ton crane with 180 feet of boom. The problem is going to be getting in this machine in tight enough so that it'll actually function. We've also rented a man lift that is a telescoping unit. We were having a hard time with the boom action of the bucket truck, and this one we're going to put over in the back of the house and direct it up over so we're suspended above everything. Right now they're just taking some of the branches off so that we can get the big crane in here. Okay, we've got the crane in place. We're going to have to use the man lift over behind the house, as well as position the small bucket, which we're doing right now, right up next to the tree. I do not want to have a man up in this tree, so that's why we're using all this secondary equipment. There's so many cables up there. setting the balance of these two cables so that this limb is lifted up without rotating is quite a challenge. We have the boom clear up in the sky there, but each of these cables has to be set so that it pulls up evenly. So we're spending quite a bit of time manipulating and maneuvering these cables. I think we should have used webbing for this. It's a lot easier to deal with than these big heavy cables. So that's what they brought us.
Spin that shot wheel in there too.
We just cut the cable and it moved quite a bit. We just have one more cable to cut. The wood was so fragile it just shattered. It was cracked in another spot. It held it, kept it from going through, but it completely shattered. Up, 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 faster, 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 fast as you can. Okay. Okay.
Down, they're going to cut some limbs off.
Not too bad. A little damage right there. Well, the job is progressing very, very slowly because of all the imbalances and all the twisting that's going on up here. We've taken off as much of the weight as we can, and now we've got to just stabilize one spot on the ground and a couple of spots up on that ridge beam. We were thinking about taking that off, but now we're considering using that as a stabilizer. If we tie that off up to the crane, that'll act as a three-way on this whole limb and theoretically keep it from rotating too much more than it's going to. So seems like every 15 minutes we have a different idea on how this is going to happen based upon what we see. This is cracked pretty bad right here. And I think maybe we should tie those together so when we lift it, that will remain attached. Cleared up everything that we can on this side and got it far enough away the house so that it rotates. It shouldn't do any more damage. These we have to leave because they're stabilizing it. And we have one down on the ground that's set in the ground pretty solidly. And that I'm hoping is going to keep it from moving around too much. Okay, we got about 2 minutes before we're going to do this. He's got it all wrapped up. Looks like he's coming down to get that thing out of the way. Branch tied to the top one, and is tied to this one off to right there, and it's broken, so we're trying to prevent that from swinging off. So in the lift, it's actually going to lift that at the same time. We've got this cable slack, and the idea is that if it rotates, it'll come to the end of slack and hopefully keep that from flipping into the house. Okay, Paul, you're on. Okay, here comes the test. We're just going to do a little bit of light lifting first and see what happens. bit of movement there. It's starting to come up a little bit. We got noise. He's got it up now. It's lifting.
Almost
23,000 pounds? Very, very worried about this because this is the third leg that's balancing it. The majority of the weight is not on the end of this leg over here, but I got to prevent that from swinging in. But it is split. We're leaving that because that's helping to stabilize this thing. We have so much brush over there that we have to lift off the corner of the house. As we get it up, lifted up off the house, we're going to go ahead and start minimizing the weight. That was one of the stability poles over there, so we're going to see what happens. Should be off the ground now. Now it's totally up to him. If this guy is the master that he claims to be, something happened. Oh, this guy is good. We got something hanging up there, rope, good. It's out of the way. Oh, yes. £23,000. Yes. In the neighbor's yard.
You want to go over here to the right?
You got it. Oh man. Okay, we're into day 3 and we have another very interesting dilemma. This entire limb up here has a significant crack and the homeowner wants to remove it as well. Our problem is the tree is cabled together. Let's see if we can see the cables a little better up here. The tree is cabled together. There's one cable right here and there's one more cable up high holding this over here, but it is quite possible that these two cables are also assisting in maintaining the integrity of the rest of this mass over here. We experienced a problem yesterday when we were lowering one limb with the crane and we had to cut the final cable. The limb had become so dependent upon the cable for its life that as soon as we cut the cable, the limb just snapped and fell apart. Fortunately, it was held up by the crane, but it did, the lower portion did swing down and hit the building. My worry is if we cut any cables here, what's that going to do to the other side of the tree? Is that going to cause it to slump over? The tree is going to be significantly imbalanced. As much as I hate to say it, I think this tree is going to have to be cut back moderately severe all the way around. It does show quite a bit of dieback up in the upper canopy, and a lot of that is in this limb over here, but when we take off this right hand side, they're only going to have half of a tree. The homeowner wants to keep the tree, and so my thought process is get a lot of the weight off on the right hand side, but maintain the integrity of those two cables, and then do the weight reduction on this side as much as we possibly can before we cut those cables, and then go back and remove the rest of this other limb. The limb is resting on the corner of the roof here. I don't know how solid it is. We'll have to check that. It was resting very, very solidly on it yesterday. The crack has not closed up any, and it's quite a ways up. I want to inspect that and see how deep it is, but I believe that it's all the way through. And the other side, it doesn't look like it's gotten any worse, but it does show that the crack goes all the way through this major limb. That's got me worried. That's one of the main cables with the turnbuckle. It's very old and it appears to be coming apart. This tree has been cabled to a point of ridiculousness. I've counted 28 cables in this tree, and I'm sure there's more. And there's numerous old cable bolts and lags and interesting connections. Some of them are antique hand forged units, but over the life of this tree, this tree has become so dependent upon the cables that it really it's like a time bomb. It's ready to explode. Something gives and everything starts to fall apart. Here's one of those very interesting old hand-forged units. That dates this cabling job. And there's also evidence of newer installations with the J-lags. You can see the absence of using a thimble here, and it's not a very clean job, so some of the work that's been done on this tree was less than professional. As you can see, there's cables everywhere in the limb that we took down yesterday, and this is also a very, very sloppy job. It's been a nightmare for the crew because everywhere we cut, we're finding bits and pieces of metal, and we've had to go through and cut out all the cables in the piles as we go, so they don't inadvertently get run through the chipper or
get hit by chainsaws. That's happened already. Now here's yet another old hand forged cable, and notice the absence of the thimble. However, look at the neatness of the job of doing this cable wrap. This is very old, but somebody really took pride in their workmanship in the way they assembled this wrapping.
Well, I'm going to let the crew get to work, and I'll follow through later on and see how it looks.